In the middle of a brewing storm, a struggling single father named Ethan risks everything to fix the roof of a mysterious woman, only to discover she secretly owns half the state. Ethan Granger, 35 years old, with calloused hands and lines on his weathered face deeper than his years, stared out the dusty window of their small rented house in Cliffside Hollow, a forgotten town pressed between hills and hardship. The wind howled as the storm rolled in. His 8-year-old daughter Mia, with freckles and warm caramel skin, clung to a ragged teddy bear and asked, "Daddy, will the roof hold this time?" The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. He fixed other people's homes, yet could barely patch his own. Widowed for nearly 3 years, he worked long hours as a handyman and roof repairman to provide for Mia. Money was always short, but his love never was. That night, as thunder cracked the sky, his phone rang. A trembling voice, woman, urgent, begged for help with a roof about to collapse. He told her no at first. Mia needed him, but guilt clawed at him. What if it was someone's mother, someone alone? He tucked Mia into bed, promised he'd be back soon, grabbed his tools and drove into the rising storm, unaware that he was heading toward fate. Windshield wipers slashed across the glass, barely revealing the winding path up Northbridge Hill. Ethan's rusted truck groaned with every turn. The coordinates led to something surreal. A modern mansion, sleek and hidden behind wrought iron gates. He parked, eyebrows furrowed. This didn't look like someone in need. He almost turned back, but then a flash of lightning revealed a silhouette, someone on the roof struggling against tarps that whipped in the wind. He ran. There she was, Aria Winslow, 32, tall and slender with striking pale skin, soaked in the rain, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and jeans. Her dark hair stuck to her face, her wide blue eyes full of panic. "You called?" Ethan shouted, climbing onto the porch and then the ladder. "You came," she replied, almost disbelieving. In that moment, amid the downpour, something passed between them. Something more than gratitude, a recognition, as if loneliness had a scent and both had inhaled it too many times. Ethan hauled himself onto the slippery roof, rain pelting his back like bullets. He grabbed the flapping tarp from Aria's trembling hands, hands that were clearly unfamiliar with manual labor, and secured it with nails and sheer will. The wind screamed around them. "I told the guy who built this it wouldn't hold," Aria yelled over the storm. "He didn't listen." "Well, now you've got someone who does," Ethan growled, half focused on the task. She watched him work, efficient, calm under pressure. He moved like someone who'd faced worse storms inside his soul than this one outside. Once the tarp was stable, he turned to her. "Let's get off this roof before we end up flying." They clambered down together, soaked and breathless. Aria offered him a towel and a cup of hot tea inside the mansion. Ethan hesitated before stepping into the grandeur, polished floors, towering ceilings, framed art that probably cost more than his entire house. "You all right?" he asked, noting the exhaustion in her face. "Physically, sure. Otherwise, that's a different question," she said, half smiling. He almost asked what she meant, but something in her eyes warned not to. The power flickered. Candlelight danced shadows along Aria's face as she sat curled in a wool blanket. She looked small despite her opulent surroundings. Ethan sat across from her, dripping and uncomfortable. "Why didn't you just call a company?" he asked. Aria shrugged. "Didn't want strangers. You came recommended by the florist in town. I fix leaks. I don't usually do midnight rescues in the rain," he said with a dry smirk. "I'm grateful you did," she replied, her voice suddenly softer. There was something haunting about her presence. A woman who seemed too refined for a storm-swept mansion, yet too hollow-eyed to belong to it. She avoided questions, deflected attention, and didn't mention her wealth. Ethan assumed she was maybe renting the place or house-sitting. He didn't pry. But when he stepped outside again, he noticed the discreet security camera embedded in a marble pillar, and the license plate on a black SUV, one reserved for state-level dignitaries or billionaires. He got into his truck with a strange feeling in his chest. Who exactly had he just saved? The next morning, Ethan awoke to Mia jumping on the couch in her pajamas. "You're back," she giggled. He hugged her tightly, breathing in her warmth. Always, but his thoughts were still at the hilltop mansion. Aria lingered in his mind, not just her looks, though she was striking, but her eyes. They told stories no mansion could hide. Later that day, while fixing gutters for a local diner, he overheard a conversation between two elderly customers. "Did you hear? Aria Winslow is back in the state, hiding up in her fortress on Northbridge Hill." "Who?" Ethan asked, approaching the booth. The women looked at him like he'd asked who the president was. "Aria Winslow," one said. "Daughter of the late Ellis Winslow. She owns half the state, oil, tech, real estate, you name it. She vanished for a year after her brother died in that yacht accident," the other added. "People say she's not right in the head since." Ethan's hands tightened around his rag. He realized then he hadn't rescued some scared homeowner in need. He'd patched the roof of the woman who could buy the whole town. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, though Arya had said nothing untrue. She hadn't pretended to be poor, he'd just assumed it. Still, there was something jarring about thinking you were helping someone in need only to find out they lived in a palace and owned half the county. That night, after tucking Mia in, he sat on the porch, sipping weak coffee and staring into the distance. His mind went back to Arya's expression in the storm, how fragile she looked despite all that wealth. He couldn't reconcile the idea of a billionaire needing anything, let alone rescue. Why had she been alone? Why didn't she have staff? Why did she climb up there herself? The questions piled up, and they weren't the kind he could ignore. The next morning, Arya's number flashed on his phone. He debated answering, then did. "Hi," she said, tentative. "I just wanted to thank you again." "No problem," he replied coolly. There was silence on the line. "I was wondering," she finally said, "if you'd come back. Not for repairs, just to talk." Ethan's first instinct was to say no, but something in her voice, a quiet vulnerability, stopped him. "I'll think about it," he said, then hung up. The second time Ethan visited Arya, the storm was gone, but the silence inside the mansion was heavier than thunder. Arya wore a white blouse tucked into soft linen pants, her black hair tied in a loose braid. Her pale skin almost shimmered against the light of the high windows. She greeted him with a faint smile that didn't quite reach her tired blue eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I," Ethan admitted. They walked through the gallery-like halls. Arya poured tea, served on fine china, though her hands trembled slightly. "I lost my brother last year," she said abruptly. "His name was Noah. He drowned off the coast of Marseille. I was supposed to be there." Ethan nodded, letting her speak. "I disappeared after that. Couldn't handle the media, the board meetings, the pity." Her voice cracked. "So I bought this place, alone, far from everyone." Now her eyes met his, clear, honest, haunted. "You didn't lie," Ethan said. "But you didn't exactly say who you were either. Would you have stayed if I had?" He thought for a long moment. "I don't know." Days passed. Ethan and Arya spoke more. He visited on weekends while Mia stayed with a neighbor. They never defined their meetings. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat in silence. One evening, Arya invited him to stay for dinner. The dining room was vast, but they sat at a small breakfast nook like old friends. Arya wore a soft gray sweater over jeans, her hair falling freely across her face. Ethan wore his flannel work shirt and boots, still dusty from a job. "I've been thinking about what you said," Arya said between bites. "About fixing leaks and patching things. Oh, everything in this house is broken, just like me." He looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability. "I don't think you're broken," he said. "I think you've just been alone too long." She blinked, and for the first time her smile felt real. Outside, rain started again, gentle this time. But inside, something fragile and beautiful was building, a bridge between two broken hearts. One Saturday morning, Ethan brought Mia along. Arya had insisted. "I'd love to meet her," she'd said. Mia, in her yellow overalls and pink rain boots, was initially shy. But the moment Arya knelt and showed her the grand piano in the music room, something clicked. "She's really nice, Daddy," Mia whispered later, tugging his sleeve. "She looked sad though, like she lost her teddy too." Ethan chuckled, but the observation hit home. That afternoon they walked the gardens. Arya held Mia's hand as they picked wildflowers growing near the stone fountain. Arya laughed more, freely, openly, like she hadn't in years. "You're good with her," Ethan said, watching them from a bench. "She reminds me that not everything has to hurt," Arya replied. Mia drew a picture for her, a house with 3 people under a rainbow. "This is you, Daddy and Arya. That's our house." Arya's eyes brimmed. Ethan watched her carefully. Something was changing, but he wasn't sure they were ready for it. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. Ethan had to work late, so Mia stayed with their neighbor, Mrs. Porter. But when he returned, Mia wasn't there. "She went looking for the lady," Mrs. Porter stammered. "She said she wanted to visit Miss Arya." "I thought you knew." Panic surged through Ethan's chest like fire. It was pouring again. The hill road was slick and dangerous. Arya's place was miles away, and Mia, small, brave, stubborn Mia, had gone on foot. He jumped in the truck and called Arya while speeding through the night. "She's not here yet," Arya said, alarm rising, "but I'll check the road now." For the first time, they were no longer 2 strangers from different worlds. Now they were just 2 people who loved the same little girl, and she was missing. Ethan's truck tore through the night, headlights cutting across sheets of rain. Every second felt like an eternity. The only thing worse than losing someone was knowing it was your fault. Guilt clawed at him as he replayed Mia's words. She looked sad, like she lost her teddy too. His little girl had sensed Arya's loneliness and gone to bring her comfort. But now she was lost in a storm. Arya was already out on foot, a flashlight in one hand. Soaked through but determined. She combed the hillside, calling Mia's name with a panic she hadn't felt since the day her brother vanished at sea. Then, finally, faint footsteps, a small voice. "Daddy?" Ethan swerved the truck to a stop near the bend. Mia stood near a tree, shivering and clutching a muddy drawing. Arya ran to her first, dropping to her knees and wrapping her in her arms. Mia clung to her tightly. "I didn't mean to scare anyone," Mia sniffled. "I just wanted to bring Arya her picture." Arya held the crumpled drawing like it was gold. "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're safe." Ethan got out, dropped to his knees, and pulled both of them into a trembling embrace. No words, just relief. They stayed the night in Arya's home, Ethan too shaken to drive, Mia too exhausted to speak. Arya made a warm bath, tucked Mia into a plush guest bed and sat beside her, stroking her damp curls. Later, in the quiet of the library, Ethan and Arya shared tea in silence. The storm outside had eased, but something more powerful had shifted between them. "Thank you," Ethan whispered. "You could have just called the police, but you didn't. You went out there yourself." "I couldn't lose another child," she said softly. Her confession opened a dam. Arya told him about the accident, the yacht, her brother, how she'd frozen instead of jumping into the water. The guilt consumed her. "I built walls around myself because I thought I didn't deserve peace or love." "You saved Mia tonight," Ethan said, placing a hand over hers. "That means something." They sat there for a long time, her hand in his, two broken people finding shelter, not in walls but in each other. The following days felt like spring had arrived early. Arya visited Ethan and Mia often. They shared meals, laughed. She helped Mia with reading and piano. And slowly something more than friendship blossomed. One afternoon, while watching Ethan rebuild a neighbor's porch, Arya approached him. "I've been thinking," she began. "I want to do more, not just for you but for people like you. People who hold communities together but are barely holding on." She pulled out a folder. "I want to start a foundation, build homes for single parents, veterans, families struggling to stay afloat, and I want you to help me lead it, design, coordinate, build what you already do on a bigger scale." Ethan blinked, stunned. "You want me to run a billionaire's charity? I want us to build something real, together." He looked down at the folder, then up at her. In her eyes, he didn't see pity. He saw partnership, respect, and hope. Ethan took a leap. With Arya's backing, they launched the Winslow Granger Foundation. He recruited local workers, trained young apprentices, and began constructing small, eco-friendly homes for families in need. News spread quickly. Some gossiped, others speculated. But for once, Ethan didn't care what the town thought. He had purpose, pride, and something even more surprising, joy. Arya worked tirelessly behind the scenes, but always made time for Mia. She read bedtime stories when Ethan was late, taught her to bake, and even built a birdhouse with her. One evening, Ethan took Arya to the edge of town where his mother's old house had once stood, now just a vacant lot. "I want to build our first home here," he said. "Our?" Arya asked, heart-catching. "I'm not just talking about houses." He turned to her, pulled out a tiny box from his coat. Inside was a modest ring, silver, simple, carved with a small vine pattern. "For someone who helped me grow." Tears welled in Arya's eyes. She nodded, speechless, and the storm that had once separated their worlds was finally behind them. The wedding was quiet, held in the town's community garden Ethan once helped build. Arya wore a pale blue dress, soft curls pinned back with wildflowers. Ethan wore a charcoal gray suit, his hands slightly trembling as he held hers. Mia stood proudly between them in a white lace dress holding a bouquet she made herself. As they exchanged vows, neighbors gathered in quiet joy. Many had once doubted Arya. Others had pitied Ethan. But today all they saw was love. Later, at their new home, a cottage near the edge of the forest, they shared dinner as a family. Arya looked across the table at Ethan and Mia, her eyes full of gratitude. "This is the life I never thought I'd have, and it's just the beginning," Ethan said, taking her hand. That night, the three of them watched the stars together from the porch. No storms, no secrets, just peace, just family. The foundation took off faster than anyone expected. By the end of the first year, 20 families had roofs over their heads, built with local hands, funded by Arya's resources, and guided by Ethan's integrity. Their story inspired donations, volunteers, and even state officials. But for Ethan, the most important project was not the houses. They were important, yes, but the home they had created together. He and Arya worked side by side daily. Arya traded boardrooms for blueprints, designer heels for work boots. She became a part of the community, not because of her wealth, but because of her willingness to listen and care. Ethan, once afraid of being overshadowed, found his strength magnified by Arya's belief in him. They were equals, each healing, each growing. And Mia, she thrived. Her once quiet world now pulsed with laughter, safety, and love. She called Arya Mama one night after a bedtime story. No one corrected her, no one needed to. Their love wasn't born of ease, it was carved from adversity, and it was real. Of course, life didn't suddenly become perfect. The foundation faced legal red tape. One of their first builds was vandalized by people who resented Arya's money invading their world. Another donor tried to manipulate the project's direction. But Ethan and Arya, battle-tested and bonded, held their ground. They confronted issues together, made decisions as partners, and stood up for the families they served. One rainy night, almost a year to the day they first met, Arya and Ethan sat in their kitchen, now cluttered with Mia's drawings and coffee mugs. "We were strangers in a storm," Arya whispered. "Now look at us," Ethan smiled. "Maybe storms don't come to destroy. Maybe they come to clear the way." They toasted to that. The next day, they broke ground on their largest site yet, a neighborhood of 30 homes, complete with a playground and community center. And Ethan, once a struggling handyman, now signed off blueprints as co-founder of something that mattered. Cliffside Hollow changed too. What was once a forgotten town now attracted media attention for its inspiring turnaround. Small businesses reopened, young people stayed instead of leaving. Volunteers traveled from other towns, and even other states, to be part of the movement. One afternoon, a local school dedicated a mural painted by students. It showed a man on a ladder fixing a roof, a woman holding blueprints, and a little girl offering a flower. Mia pointed and beamed. "That's us." The townsfolk clapped, and the mayor awarded Ethan and Arya with the Community Heart Award. But the couple didn't stay for the after-party. They walked hand in hand through their favorite garden trail, grateful for the quiet after the applause. "I never wanted to be famous," Ethan said. "You're not, you're just loved," Arya replied. That, he decided, was better. One spring morning, dark clouds gathered again. A new storm was forecasted, stronger than the last. The town braced itself. But this time they were ready. Thanks to the foundation, homes were fortified, generators were installed, evacuation plans had been rehearsed. Arya and Ethan led the effort. They coordinated shelters, moved the elderly to safe areas, and turned the community center into a hub for food and warmth. When the storm passed, there was damage, but no tragedy. No one lost their roof, no one lost their home, and no one was alone. Ethan stood with Arya, Mia between them, surveying the town at sunrise. "You didn't just change my life," Arya said. "You gave me one. And you gave mine meaning," he replied. They kissed as the first light returned to the valley, the clouds parting like curtains on a brand new day. Years later, Mia, now a young woman, would retell the story. "How did you and Mama meet?" someone would ask. And she'd smile and say, "During a storm. My dad went to fix a stranger's roof and ended up building a whole new life." The moral of their story was simple. Sometimes the people we're meant to meet are found not in sunshine but in storms. And when love is built slowly, brick by brick, it weathers anything. From two broken souls to a whole family, from one roof to a town full of hope, from a chance call to a forever kind of love. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of second chances and the strength found in unexpected places, please subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts in the comments, spread the love by sharing this video, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story of hope, resilience, and real love. Until next time, remember, some storms come not to break you but to bring you home.